So the only way to accomplish our mission in Iran is to put boots on the ground. That's a new assessment from the Wall Street Journal, and we're seeing quite a few indications recently that U.S. troop deployments into Iran are imminent. Now look, clearly, this was not the original plan. If it was, then these assets would have been ready to go when we launched, but now it is seeming more and more like a ground operation is one of the cards that we're going to have to play. In fact, General Mattis spoke to the challenges of this yesterday. Mattis is a retired four-star Marine general and formerly the Secretary of Defense under President Trump in his first administration, when just yesterday he said, quote, "We're in a tough spot, ladies and gentlemen. I can't identify a lot of options." Now, the Wall Street Journal has one of those options available, saying we need to put boots on the ground and we need to do it now. Wall Street Journal, of course, being a relatively hawkish publication when you're looking at Iran, and a publication that has advocated for regime change and clearly recognizes the threat that the Iranian regime poses. So we should view this as kind of a trial balloon, floating this out there to see what the response is from the American people. They say the Trump administration finds itself in a larger war than it expected, facing a profoundly hard decision. President Trump must put boots on the ground to open the Strait of Hormuz and demonstrate the unquestionable supremacy of American power. If he fails, his legacy will be one of American collapse. If he succeeds, he will have prepared the United States for an intense period of competition over the next decade. That's kind of a zero-sum argument at this point, and I hate this for what it's worth, that we're at this point now where we're talking about we have to take this next step or else it could be the end of the United States. We have put ourselves in this situation where all of a sudden the Strait of Hormuz is quickly becoming the key issue. It was not even one of the original war aims, so it didn't need to be because the strait was open before the war. But now we're talking about the need to put boots on the ground, risk more of our sons and daughters' lives to open the strait. They say, quote, "It is crucial that Mr. Trump resist the temptation to walk away, stay the course, reopen the Strait of Hormuz, and demonstrate the credibility of America and its military commitments. The only way to accomplish this with a reasonable chance of success is to put boots on the ground." Now, in that argument from the Wall Street Journal, and all these sources, of course, will be linked in the description below, they talk about the primary focus there being the Strait of Hormuz. That's what we were trying to accomplish here. It's not regime change. It's not the end of their missile program. It's not the end of their nuclear program. It's not their Navy, their Air Force, their proxy network, anything like that. All of a sudden, it's this kind of rapid, understandable shift to the Strait of Hormuz. In fact, the Washington Post mentioned this in an article yesterday where they said, quote, "Reopening the strait, a crucial conduit for global energy supplies, has emerged as perhaps the paramount objective of a war that security officials now believe is unlikely to achieve goals that briefly seemed possible at the outset of the U.S.-Israeli military operation, including overthrowing Iran's theocratic regime and putting a nuclear weapon permanently out of Tehran's reach." They say breaking Iran's stranglehold on the strait could enable Trump to wind down the war while claiming victory, halt an expanding global energy crisis, and deprive Iran of a potent deterrent against future strikes. Do you understand what has happened here? Iran's strategic leverage over the Strait of Hormuz has shifted the initiative to where if we are genuinely not talking about the initial objectives of the war and now it is responding to something that Iran has sole control over, we are responding in this fight. We are no longer setting the conditions if this is actually how things are moving. And from an outsider's perspective, that seems to be the case. Military operations are ongoing, no doubt. U.S. and Israeli forces continue to strike targets all across the country, and there's no indication that's going to stop anytime soon. Missile production is hampered, going to be for a while. A lot of facilities destroyed, a lot of launchers destroyed, IRGC leadership and leadership of the country taken out. But the Strait of Hormuz, that is the front and centerpiece of any conversation in recent days. They say even so, an operation to restore commercial traffic in the strait could take at least weeks, put U.S. sailors and other forces at risk, and expose U.S. warships to attacks from hidden coastline positions, submerged mines, and drones sent by air or skimming the water surface. Keeping the channel open could mean devoting U.S. military and intelligence resources to escorting missions and monitoring threats for an unknown duration, with any successful attack by Iran sowing panic in energy markets and in the shipping industry. Again, we've talked about this pretty regularly. It is an asymmetric threat here. One drone every so often into the Strait of Hormuz that is not intercepted or destroyed on the ground poses a significant threat to shipping and to the insurance industries that aren't going to insure the ships moving through. They don't have to hit everything. They just have to get one drone or one missile through, every so often. That's what they're getting at when they talk about the unknown duration of needing to have boots on the ground, in this case, to secure the Strait of Hormuz. Now, recently, we've talked a lot about the drone threat at the Strait, and I've said that there's been rumors, reports of possibly Iranian mines in the Strait. Yesterday, we seem to have gotten confirmation on that. U.S. officials told CBS News that there are at least a dozen underwater mines through the vital passageway, according to current American intelligence assessments. They say the mines currently employed by Iran in the Strait are the Iranian-manufactured Maham 3 and Maham 7 limpet mine. So just a quick update there. In addition to the drones and to the missiles, the anti-ship missiles, and more, it does appear that there actually are some mines set in the Strait as well. So it's not just a matter of ships being brave and going for it. They could blow up and sink right there in the Strait. Now, turning to the possibility or likelihood at this point of U.S. troops being used in some sort of ground operation in Iran, I want to start with an announcement in Stars and Stripes just yesterday, where they say the 82nd Airborne is being prepared to head overseas. Quote, the 82nd Airborne Division's Quick Reaction Brigade is being eyed for a possible deployment tied to operations in Iran. The New York Times reported this as thousands of Marines also make their way to a region where questions swirl over the potential for a ground operation. No final order has been issued to dispatch the 82nd Airborne's immediate response force, comprised of 3,000 soldiers, but prudent planning was underway, senior defense officials told the Times in a late Monday report. The Fort Bragg-based brigade can be deployed anywhere in the world in under 24 hours and serves as the Army's emergency response force. So, not shocking any point whenever there's oh my gosh, we might actually need ground forces, and the 82nd gets activated, like that's what they're there for, so that should not set off alarm bells. But again, line it up with everything else here. It does seem increasingly likely that ground forces are going to be used. So on Friday, we have the Marines from the Tripoli Amphibious Ready Group arriving in the Middle East. That's the first large grouping of forces that could be used in some sort of land operation. The Boxer Amphibious Ready Group just left the United States. They're set to arrive in theater next month. Now, of course, the big question here is, what would a ground operation look like in Iran? Very vague, right? There's a reason I'm not saying invasion or amphibious operation or airborne operation. This can go so many different directions, and part of that is we don't really know what the objectives are, right? This is not a clear cut. There was a time at the beginning of the war where President Trump was talking about unconditional surrender. That probably would have meant marching on Moscow and like occupying portions of Iran. You know, we got an idea of what that might look like militarily. We don't really know what it is at this point or what purpose the ground troops would be serving. So, for example here, seizing Harg Island in kind of the northwestern portion of the Persian Gulf is a very different mission set than marching on and occupying Tehran. You need different forces for those two things. It's a different duration, different casualty estimates for those. Of course, a special operations raid to secure nuclear material in 3 or 4 different locations is very different than for an indefinite period of time holding territory along the Gulf Coast to keep the Strait of Hormuz open. So which one of those is it? And every one of those comes with their own risks and individual assessments, and you have to balance that with the resources and the assets we have on hand. So it's not really worth, at this point, assessing what a ground operation could look like, because it could be any number of those things. And to that end, I think it's actually worth looking more at what the capabilities are that we have in theater right now. Aaron McLean over at the School of War podcast, I think, did a great job breaking this down just yesterday. I'll have his episode linked in the description below. He had a naval and a Marine officer on to talk about the capabilities of these amphibious ready groups and the Marine expeditionary units and what they can and cannot do, kind of what size island they might go after, what additional support they might need, and how long you could reasonably expect them to hold on to some of this territory. So a lot of this points to the possibility of some sort of ground forces being used this Friday. I mean, that is the date that President Trump's new extended window to have Iran open the Strait of Hormuz expires. That's also the date that the Tripoli Amphibious Ready Group, and I think it's the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit, are set to arrive in theater. And there have been some rumblings, unconfirmed, of quite a few special operations forces being moved to the Middle East that would be in place ready to go by this weekend. So next couple of days here, probably going to be pretty telling. Now, for anyone interested, we just stood up a Substack a couple days ago. We're like 500 subscribers, which is awesome. The vast majority of the stuff over there is free. What we're using it for is consolidating the content in one place. That platform is really impressive, by the way. We did some work on it a couple of years ago, and it was just kind of so-so, but they've added so many features, and there's so many solid creators over there and organizations. It's worth checking out if you haven't. But anyways, on Substack, it's going to be one place where we have long-form content, short-form content, interviews, and then pictures and videos we pull out during research, and threads, articles, podcasts, all of kind of the, when I'm digging through things day to day to put together these videos, we're going to be putting that as kind of a thread in Substack so you can kind of see the source material as we go. Some of it gets used in videos, some of it doesn't. I think it's all pretty interesting. But again, for those interested, that link will be in the description below. That's all we got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.